Continue further with the talk on consciousness. I would like to say something about mindfulness of pain, because there are still some people who are not so familiar with this part of the practice. Different types of pain. One is the pain that comes from disease or some some physical cause. For example, you have a flu, or if it's more serious, you may have cancer, or it may be just some physical discomfort, or this doesn't come under this category. What is included in this category will be those injuries, like you broke your leg or twisted your back, then those comes under this category. These have more serious consequences, and so it will not disappear so easily. Those that come from sitting for a long time, sitting in the wrong position, and these sort of things, which are relatively minor, because when you move, then it's all over. This includes those pain that comes with not changing the posture for over a period of time. For example, you sleep too long, you hit one side, wake up with a stiff neck. Then there's a third type, which is in between these two types. And this is like those pain that come with old age. Because in old age, your body is breaking down. You won't die yet, but you just suffer. So this type of pain also doesn't disappear so fast, but you won't have to fear for your life. In those type of serious diseases, comes with a lot of pain, and then this is not something to deal with in the beginning. Because when you look at it mindfully, you say only mindfully, then it just becomes bigger and bigger, and then it won't go away. It follow you wherever you go, and then you can become quite depressed. So what we do is usually we try to build up mindfulness from elsewhere before facing it. For example, you watch rising, falling, you watch other things which are not, as long as they are not painful because of that. Then when the concentration and mindfulness, then when you look at this pain, similarly, you can hold on to the mindfulness longer, and you can see the change of the pain in a more detached manner. In the second type of pain, this is what we call the normal, ordinary pain. Then when it becomes strong, you should try to face with it. The idea is to keep yourself as calm as possible, not to get worried, and watch the pain in as detached and as an impersonal way as possible, seeing it in the different ways that it comes and goes. When you're able to observe it in the nature of the three characteristics, then it eventually passes away. The second thing is you have the right attitude to it. That means firstly, don't be afraid of it. Treat it like a sick child. So in a sick child, you don't get angry with the child. You only make things worse if you scold the child. Keep quiet, making too much noise. So you try to be as soft and as peaceful as possible by watching the pain. And you especially pay attention to the change. The pain does not just stay there, it is always changing. If you don't see the pain changing, then you're in trouble. And third, you take the pain as a kind of training. If you really don't want to watch the pain, you don't have to, but sooner or later you will have to, so you must start now. I was telling there was this lady she said she wants to do only Cittanupassana, meditation of consciousness, because the teacher told her, you don't have to watch the pain if you don't want to. Oh, she was so happy, so she doesn't have to watch pain. If she's really doing Cittanupassana, that's one thing, but she's not doing with Cittanupassana, she's just trying to watch the consciousness here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit dreamy, a little bit thinking. So you have to watch pain, otherwise you are not doing Vipassana, your mind is just like a cloud floating about. In Vipassana, you will have to face pain sooner or later. This is just suffering at the first level. Vipassana is basically looking at suffering and then detaching yourself from suffering. When you see the suffering, then you would want to be free from it. When you watch pain, there's no doubt about it. But the detachment from it and freedom from it is not running away. Of course you can do that if you want to, but it still comes back to you. So what we mean is when you watch pain, to go beyond pain. This for the third type of pain that comes with old age. You have to take it with a smile on your face. Old age, oh, old age. And then you start watching it. Since you're going to die anyway, but you're not going to die so soon, you make the best of situations. Pain is not as bad as that you have to take just painkillers all the time. You can able to watch it, especially if you have been practicing for some time, for a long time. When old age comes, your experience would be very useful to watch pain. This is called growing old gracefully. Usually people grow old and they become very depressive, they become very grumpy, so you can understand why, because so much suffering. But you don't have to be like that. You can take all this as vipassana objects, and they can make your mind brighter, more mindful, more meaningful. So the general idea is that you have to learn to watch pain. First is you have to be mindful of pain, and when you can be mindful of pain, watch how pain arises and passes away. As for those feelings that you don't see as pain, like pleasure, you don't see it as suffering, you see it as happiness, and then it can be more difficult because you hold on to them. See, most people, the ordinary people in the world, they run away from pain and they try to hold on to the pleasure. But pleasure and pain are both feelings. When the mind is very attached to pleasure, then sooner or later the pain will follow, because they're basically the same thing. So the real peace comes about when you're detached from all feelings, including pleasurable feelings. So you need to understand how suffering is possible and exists within the pleasurable feelings. Then you can understand the meaning of peacefulness that is not connected with feelings. Peace is better than joy. Okay, now we go to the consciousness foundation. You find that in the flow chart for Cittanupassana, there are two flow charts. The first one is, you see like this. There's the consciousness that rises at the 5 sense doors. Then there's the 6, the mind door, consciousness that arises at the mind door. So the mind runs along these 5 senses, 6 senses. Now what one basically needs to do is to able to see the consciousness at all the 6 sense doors are different. That means the seeing consciousness is different from the hearing consciousness, is different from the smelling, tasting, and touching consciousness. All these are different types of consciousness. Most people think that the mind or consciousness that sees, hears, smells, tastes, touch, all things are the same. And more than that, identify with the consciousness. I am the consciousness. So in Vipassana, you develop the Vipassana mindfulness, and you see everything as non-self. So you should be able to see the consciousness as non-self as well. And this consciousness, which is non-self, arises and passes away moment to moment. Like the seeing comes, when you don't see, it disappears. When the hearing comes, when there's no sound, disappears. The trouble is when people cannot see the consciousness, they only see the mental state. And this happens at the mind door. Because you don't see, you don't hear, but then you go into the mind. When you see the mind runs, but it's still the same mind. So you have to try to see the consciousness is changing moment to moment, and it is non-self. This is difficult because the knowing mind or the consciousness is usually at the background. So you start by seeing change and impermanence in the mental states and the objects first. You see this change clearly, then also you will see the consciousness changing and permanent. Where consciousness has many levels, from the grosser forms like the defilements to the finer forms like in concentration. So you see here, first you try to be mindful of the consciousness as a five sense door, as the rise and pass away. So what happens is when you go to these five senses, it doesn't stop there. It starts responding and thinking about it. For example, you hear something, then you start thinking, what sound is that? They already started thinking. And there's a bird. What type of bird is that? And then, oh, I like birds. Then you can't stand anymore. You get up and look for birds. So what happens if you're really mindful of this? Then the mindfulness goes to the mind door. So when you go to the mind door, those are the mind door consciousness. You may have, usually first level are the Kama Vachara Citta, the sense realm consciousness. These are consciousness still connected with sense objects. For example, you meditate and you start thinking when I go home, what am I going to cook and eat? No? I'm going to cook pasta with gorgonzola. I'm going to eat dessert tiramisu. You start thinking that all these are in the mind door. Although it's connected with the senses like food, taste, but it's in the mind door. But when that happens, you're not watching consciousness, you're just thinking. So you're not thinking, and you see the mind there, thinking, running. And then you're watching the thinking consciousness. But there may be different mental states there, like you're thinking of eating something fantastic. The Czech will think of eating kanelitki. I don't know how you say dumplings, huh? So when that happens, you may have craving. So you watch the craving, then you're watching the mental state. But if you just watch the consciousness, then you see the mental state as part of the consciousness. So all this occurs at the mind door here. But to be able to watch it effectively, there must be enough mindfulness. Otherwise, you'll be carried away. And so if you are really mindful of consciousness, the defilements will, for the time being, be put aside, and you're just watching the wholesome consciousness. And so eventually the concentration will arise through watching just the different types of pure consciousness arising and passing away. So this is this part. For certain people, the concentration may develop deeper into absorptions. And so it's this part. Still you're watching the consciousness. So if your insight is strong, then you see the three characteristics with regards to the consciousness. And so when the three characteristic arises, then the process of transcendence occurs. So when the transcendence is complete, then it goes into anatta, which is going into the unconditioned. So generally the flow chart shows you the direction of the development. Now in this second part, refers to basically the same thing, except that it is spoken in terms of experience. This is spoken in terms of the different types of consciousness that you pass through when you... And this is more towards the process of transcendence. For example, there are two lines here. This one is more towards the narrow or digital. This is more towards the cloud or more open. For example, we are talking about the dog. For example, in the beginning, when you try to watch the consciousness keeps running about through the six sense doors. It rises in the eye door, with the eye object, it rises with the sound at the ear door, and so on. It hops around and you can see it running like the dog running about. Some people's mind are different, their mind are more like chicken. Yeah, this one lady, so she practices and she's supposed to have insight and so on. And she said, how should I be practicing more? So she asked, I told her, your mind is still not refined. You must refine your mindfulness and observation. So that the refined mind is like, taking a needle and making a picture out of silk, They have these people in China, they do this needlework. It's a kind of art, where you make a big picture full of silk. You know, the silk is very fine, our thread, and the picture is very fine. And I told her, comparatively, your mind is like a chicken. The chicken goes and your mind is like that. So you've got to refine your mind. Because when you go into the deeper insights, you're looking at finer and finer things, more and more subtle things. So you have to have very fine mindfulness. So in the first phase, this is still quite gross. It runs up and down, here and there. So you have to be mindful to bring it to calm down. When it calms down, it naturally goes into the mind door. Because the consciousness can be observed only at the mind door. Eye door, you see the eye object. Ear door, you see the ear object. And so on. So can you see the consciousness? If you can see the consciousness, then it has a color. It has got red consciousness. It doesn't have red consciousness, it has a red shirt. Does the mind have a color? Sometimes it looks like it's got color, but it doesn't have a color. It is not an eye object, it's a mind object. You can come with a perception of color, but it's not the eye object. So when you are mindful and watching consciousness and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, naturally you forget the surroundings. So the base of consciousness is what? The base object, if you use primary consciousness as a primary object, what's the base? Like I said, the body, what is it? It's the posture. And when you go to the posture, the base of it is earth element. In terms of consciousness, feelings, what is it? Pain. First is the pain. When you go further, what is it? Feeling. Pure sensation, which is the neutral feeling. Because the neutral feeling is the base where arises happy and painful. You agree with me? For example, if a very soft sound, but when the sound becomes stronger, who does all that thing? Pavarotti. Pavarotti is not around, you have Andrea Bocelli. After that it goes down. Neutral feeling is that full and pleasurable feeling is like the Andrea Pavarotti. I think, for example, painful feeling is, oh, so sad, I'm so sad, why am I so sad, Mamma Mia? That is a painful feeling. But happy feeling is, joy to the world, sing, oh, that's happy feeling. So what is sound? You go back to the neutral feeling. And so the neutral feeling is the base of the feelings. And for consciousness, it's the mindful consciousness. That's the peace of mind. You want to go one step further, it's the Bhavanga Citta. Bhavanga Citta is where the base of all the consciousness arising. But that's very subtle. Sometimes people experience it, they don't even know what is that. For example, some people meditate until they go to sleep. They're not totally asleep, no, they are a little bit awake, but 90% is. There's one citta consciousness mindful, the rest is sleep. And one consciousness, then sleep. So they're totally asleep. No, they still know there's a very peaceful state there. So somebody even told him that the one is your phala, your nibbana object. But she's still wise enough. I don't think so. I think I was sleeping. So I asked her, can you describe that mind? Well, it was just very quiet. It wasn't doing anything. It was just there. Yeah, you're sleeping. So this is what we call Bhavanga Citta. But you can watch it deeper. It is something very clear and transparent. Then you can see what's inside and the object it takes. But usually more difficult. But the starting point is, as I tell people, when you watch consciousness, just be present and be mindful and don't think of anything and hold it there. So the consciousness itself becomes its object. So when the mind runs to some other object, mental object, you know, those are just mental objects. But there's so many types of mental objects. It has the whole universe of objects in there. And so you keep it small. Keep it simple. Just keep the mindfulness presence and in consciousness present and watch it changes within that present consciousness. If you look at it properly, it changes. This comes into play. Space in the room. What is the space in the room? The space is consciousness. There are three types of spaces: outer space and inner space. It's joking, but conventionally, yes, outer space. So you want to go to Mars, you have to go to outer space. You have to build a rocket. Then there's the inner space. What is the inner space? What is internal space? Give an example of internal space. All the spaces in the body. Yeah, the ear, the nose. It's mentioned in the text. But the three types of space I want to talk about is, first is the conventional space. There's the outer space and internal space. This is, in the Abhidhamma terms, more like concepts. It's a conceptual space. The other one is, the Abhidhamma talks of it as delimiting matter. It's called it the Akasa Dhatu. It refers to when different material qualities cannot coexist. Like, for example, the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the wind element. They can coexist. But the eye base and the ear base cannot coexist. The 28 species of rupa, some can coexist, some cannot. And it's because of this that in the conventional world it is also influenced. It also influences the conventional perception in the conventional of different things. Now the third type of space which we are concerned here is the mental space. See, the mental space is basically consciousness. But we think of space more on the conceptual or the physical level. The mental is different. What's the difference between mental space and physical space? Can you feel the space? What do you call space, Luca? And because you can move. But there's movement, there's no space. Movement is movement, space is space. What is the space? Can be a big space or small space. We like to have big space, we can do a lot of walking meditation. What happens if not enough space? So like the monks, when they meditate in the forest, they have this umbrella and then mosquito net. And so they walk inside, round, round, round. So 1 hour they walk. Yeah, they do that. I don't do that. It's just too much for me. I got claustrophobia. No, so that's basically the idea. If you say movement is space, movement is not space. So when you talk mental space, what it means is how much the ability of the mind to contain an object. So when this is an object, and this is an object, so you can contain the... Can you put this in your mind, please? Of course you can. It's an object. So in a way you can put it in your mind. But that space and this space are two different things. Because you see, the mind can know an object. So when you know an object, it means that the mind keeps the object. So it's like keeping the object. So that knowing of the object has a similarity of keeping an object. So in this sense, it is like space, in the sense of the ability to receive objects. This occurs at the mind door. And the mind door is the bhavanga. That becomes something interesting. But the bhavanga has its own object. So when you talk about the mind door, it refers to function of the consciousness. Bhavanga citta has many functions. One of them is to act as the mind door. That in the door, in the sense, it is like a door in the sense that it allows objects to come in. But the consciousness that contains the object is not the bhavanga citta. It's a different type of consciousness. But the bhavanga citta can be an object as well. But in this case, the consciousness is not the bhavanga citta, but occurs at the mind door. You get what I mean? The mind has many faces. It's like a very complicated algebra equation. You can fit in anything once and it becomes something else. It just gives you an idea. When you watch consciousness, at the beginning we tell you to watch this consciousness, that consciousness, that consciousness. But be very open. That's when you go into conditioning of the consciousness. That's when you go into Dhammanupassana. But first make it simple. there's this consciousness. So I put it like the space. And all the objects that arise in the space in the mind comes and goes. So you put your eyes in the consciousness. You see star, you see your face, your own face, you see your father's face, and you see bird, and the bird becomes a Superman, Superwoman. So you keep things simple. Keep it to the ultimate realities. You don't go into the concepts, although they will still come, but you don't go into it. Like concepts are like that, like pictures and words, and all those are concepts. So these mind objects will arise. These mind objects you tend to keep on with it are Paramattha Dhammas, ultimate realities, like feelings, like consciousness, like even the material qualities did arise. You can keep it keep it even more closer to just consciousness. You stay with the mental states. So when you watch this carefully, they are not static. They arise and pass away. They arise and pass away in the sense of personal object, not in the sense of concept. The concept is like you have a picture. Picture changes, yes? See a dancer, Indian dancer, ding, ding. It changes, but this is not a change of a person. Or you hear some Pavarotti singing. What does he say? Furtivo lacrime, something like that. No? It's still changing, but it is not vipassana way. No? So when you see it like this, stars that twinkle. Because movement tends to be conceptual. Vipassana tends to be arising and disappearing. So when you go into more clearer vipassana, where you see the mind changes with the object, not just the changes of the object, but the consciousness that sees it changes with the object, then you start going to this whirlpool. That means you not only see the arising and disappearing of the objects, the space, which is basically the consciousness, also changes. When you don't see the consciousness, then the space is empty. But actually the space is the consciousness. So this is what it means. No? It's too late now, better stop. Continue tomorrow.